But even in the desert, the winds of change were blowing. Narrator, Muammar Gaddafi. The name still echoes across the deserts and cities of Libya. His journey from a humble Bedouin to a revolutionary leader is a tale of ambition, resilience, and transformation. A Bedouin born in a tent, Gaddafi's early life was shaped by the vastness of the Sahara. Nomadic traditions ran deep. The endless horizons and the harsh, unforgiving environment instilled in him a sense of survival and adaptability. Stories of tribal alliances and ancient conflicts fueled his imagination. These tales of bravery and strategy were more than just stories. They were lessons in leadership and unity.
The decline of colonial powers, the remnants of foreign rule were everywhere, a constant reminder of a past that needed to be overcome. The rise of Arab nationalism. A new wave of identity and pride was sweeping across the Arab world, calling for unity and self-determination. These forces ignited a fire in you, my son. The desire to break free from the chains of oppression and to forge a new path for your people.
I see the poverty around us. The stark contrast between the wealth of the few and the suffering of the many was a daily reality. I feel the sting of foreign influence. The presence of foreign powers was a constant reminder of the loss of sovereignty and control. I yearn for a different Libya, a strong and independent nation. A vision of a country where its people could thrive without external interference.
His ambition burned bright, fueled by revolutionary fervor. Gaddafi's determination to change the course of his nation's history was unwavering. The desert had birthed an unlikely leader. From the vast, empty sands emerged a man with a vision, ready to challenge the status quo and lead his people towards a new dawn. 1. A young army officer, Gaddafi saw an opportunity. King Idris, out of touch and distant, had lost his grip on power. Gaddafi, with his charisma and revolutionary zeal, rallied his fellow officers. The coup was swift and bloodless, the monarchy overthrown. At the age of 27, Gaddafi declared himself the leader of the Libyan Arab Republic. The world watched, intrigued and apprehensive as this new player emerged on the world stage. Gaddafi, with his fiery rhetoric and promises of a golden age, wasted no time in reshaping Libya. The old order was swept away, replaced by Gaddafi's own brand of revolutionary socialism. Gaddafi articulated his vision in his Green Book. This was no ordinary political manifesto. It was a blueprint for a new society. Gaddafi railed against capitalism and communism. He proposed a third universal theory based on direct democracy and Islamic principles. His reforms were sweeping and radical. Nationalization of industries, land redistribution, free education and healthcare. Gaddafi wanted to create a socialist utopia in the desert. He poured Libya's oil wealth into social programs. He built schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. For a time, it seemed like Gaddafi's grand experiment might succeed. Gaddafi's ambitions extended beyond Libya's borders. He was not content with merely leading his own nation. He envisioned a grander role for himself on the world stage. He dreamed of a united Arab world, free from Western influence. This vision was deeply rooted in his belief that the Arab world could only achieve true sovereignty and prosperity by standing together against external powers. He championed Pan-Arabism, advocating for a single Arab state stretching from the Atlantic to the Gulf. This idea was not new, but Gaddafi's fervor and resources brought renewed attention to the concept. His efforts to unite Arab nations often proved futile, met with suspicion and resistance from other Arab leaders. Many saw him as a threat to their own power and were wary of his intentions. Undeterred by the setbacks in the Arab world, Gaddafi turned his attention to Africa. He believed that the continent held immense potential and that its people deserved a future free from the shadows of colonialism. He saw himself as a champion of the continent, a liberator from colonialism. Gaddafi's rhetoric resonated with many African leaders who were also striving for independence and self-determination. He poured money into infrastructure projects and supported liberation movements across Africa. His investments were aimed at building roads, schools, and hospitals, which he believed were essential for the continent's development. He even proposed the creation of a United States of Africa, a Pan-African superstate. This ambitious idea was meant to unify the diverse nations of Africa under a single government, fostering economic and political strength. Gaddafi's grand visions, while often unrealistic, reflected his unwavering belief in the power of unity. He was convinced that only through solidarity could the Arab and African worlds achieve true independence and prosperity. His legacy remains a complex tapestry of ambition, idealism, and controversy. Gaddafi was a man of contradictions. He was a charismatic leader who could inspire crowds with his fiery speeches. He genuinely cared about the plight of the poor and oppressed. He could be charming and disarming even to his fiercest critics, but he was also ruthless and authoritarian. He brooked no opposition and silenced dissent with an iron fist. He created a cult of personality around himself. His eccentricities became legendary, his flamboyant dress and female bodyguards adding to his mystique. As Gaddafi's grip on power tightened, so too did his regime's repression. Political opponents were imprisoned, tortured, or disappeared. Freedom of speech was curtailed. The media was tightly controlled. Gaddafi's revolutionary committees, once instruments of popular participation, became tools of surveillance and intimidation. The world turned a blind eye for years, seduced by Libya's oil wealth and Gaddafi's anti-Western rhetoric. But the truth could not be hidden forever. Human rights groups documented the abuses. Dissidents spoke out, risking their lives to expose the regime's brutality. Gaddafi's relationship with the West was complex and often adversarial. He was a vocal critic of Western imperialism and supported groups considered terrorist organizations by the US and its allies. His involvement in the Lockerbie bombing in 1988 made Libya a pariah state, subject to international sanctions. However, Gaddafi was also a pragmatist. In the 2000s, he renounced terrorism and agreed to dismantle Libya's weapons of mass destruction program. This led to a thaw in relations with the West. Western leaders, eager for access to Libya's oil, were willing to overlook his past transgressions. The Arab Spring of 2011 proved to be Gaddafi's undoing. Inspired by the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, Libyans took to the streets demanding an end to Gaddafi's 42-year rule. The regime responded with brutal force, unleashing the army on unarmed protesters. The world watched in horror as the violence escalated. NATO intervened militarily, launching airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces. The rebels, aided by foreign powers, gradually gained the upper hand. Gaddafi, once a seemingly invincible dictator, was now on the run, his regime crumbling around him. The Gaddafi's reign of terror ended in October 2011. After over 4 decades of iron-fisted rule, the Libyan people finally saw the collapse of a regime that had long oppressed them. He was captured and killed by rebel forces, his body displayed in a chilling spectacle that was broadcast around the world. This moment was both a symbol of liberation and a harbinger of the chaos to come. His death marked the end of an era, but it did not bring peace to Libya. Instead, it opened a power vacuum that various factions scrambled to fill, leading to a prolonged period of instability. The country descended into chaos, riven by tribal rivalries, political factions, and the proliferation of militias. The dream of a unified, peaceful Libya seemed more distant than ever as different groups vied for control. Gaddafi's legacy is a complex one. While his rule was marked by brutality and human rights abuses, it also brought about certain advancements that cannot be overlooked. He was a ruthless dictator who ruled through fear and oppression. His secret police and draconian laws kept the population in a state of constant anxiety, but he also oversaw a period of significant social and economic development in Libya. Under his rule, the country saw improvements in infrastructure, healthcare, and education, which were unprecedented at the time. He remains a controversial figure, revered by some as a champion of the Arab world and reviled by others as a brutal tyrant. His mixed legacy continues to influence Libya's path forward as the nation grapples with the duality of his impact. Today, the Libyan people long for stability and peace. They hope for a future where they can rebuild their nation, free from the shadows of past tyrannies and the chaos that followed. More than a decade after his death, Gaddafi's ghost continues to haunt Libya. The country remains fractured and unstable, plagued by violence and political turmoil. His supporters, though marginalized, still yearn for the stability and prosperity they enjoyed under his rule. Gaddafi's shadow looms large over Libya's future. Will the country be able to overcome the divisions of the past and forge a new path? Or will it remain trapped in a cycle of violence and instability? Only time will tell what the ultimate legacy of Muammar Gaddafi will be.